On April 3rd, Plus 972 magazine published this article, which exposes the Israeli military's secret AI systems used to track and attack Palestinians. These systems, called Lavender and Where's Daddy, are used by the IDF to facilitate the ongoing massacres against Palestinians in Gaza. To understand more about how these systems work and how they are shaping the future of warfare, I spoke with an expert.
Sure. So I'm Paul Biggar. I'm founder of Tech For Palestine. Before I helped found Tech For Palestine, I was founder at Darklang and founder at CircleCI, which are tech companies in the DevTool space. I live in New York and I'm from Ireland.
Awesome. Okay, so as you know, I reached out to you to discuss the recent findings in the Plus 972 magazine, which talk about Lavender and the other grotesquely named technology called Where's Daddy, which is used by the IDF to track down and generate kill lists of Palestinians in Gaza. So I'd just love to understand from an expert like you how each of these systems, Gospel and Lavender and Where's Daddy, how do they work and how do they work with each other to facilitate the genocide in Gaza?
Yeah, so it's important to understand what an AI system is. So an AI system is a piece of software, a little bit like ChatGPT, for example, or a recommendation algorithm like Netflix or Twitter or Instagram. Right? It is a thing that produces some content that you want to use. So in the case of Gospel, what they're producing is a list of buildings to target. In the case of Lavender, they're producing a list of people to target. And the things that they're targeting are not things where they, or so at least in the case of Lavender, it's kind of a bit more unclear how Gospel works. But in the case of Lavender, what they're trying to find is they're trying to suggest targets. So they're trying to find people who they might have reason to believe might be involved in Hamas. And it's important to recognize that these aren't investigative processes. They're not, no one has gone through a bunch of data to prove that someone has committed violence against Israel, against IDF, that they were part of the October 7th attacks. None of that is what Lavender is doing. It's really about suggesting a person that could be part of it. And unfortunately, what they're doing with that then is that they're using the Where's Daddy system to find out when is the optimal time to bomb their house, when they're home, so that they can have the maximum collateral damage, so that they can kill as many family members as possible. And Israel has suggested that 15 to 20 is the number of casualties or of people being killed that they will that is acceptable in order to be able to take out someone that they believe could be possibly a member of Hamas. And when you combine all of that, it's important to recognize that it's not really about finding Hamas members, or it's not really about taking out people who took part in October 7th. What this is a whitewashing or an ethics washing of the genocide that they're deliberately committing. And you can see this in a number of different elements of the 972 article. And one of them is that when they don't have enough targets, they lower the threshold. So that's not something you would do if you were concerned about making sure that you got Hamas members. The other thing is that the AI system is supposedly trained on the behavior of commanders. So the behavior of Hamas commanders, and looks at, for example, how often they change their phones, how often they change where they spend the night, or what groups they're in. And so they've taken that data and they've lowered the thresholds so that they can get any militants or any suspected militants in Hamas at all. But you can see pretty easily that Hamas commanders and Hamas militants, like low-level people, they don't have the same behaviors, right? Hamas commanders are organizing, whereas Hamas militants are doing. And those have very different behaviors, and you can't just take a commander algorithm and say that we're going to, lower the threshold so that then we can catch militants or lower level militants. What you're actually going to catch is people who are members of WhatsApp groups, people who are, have ordinary, normal behaviors of normal people in a society. And that's exactly, really the purpose. You can say in one sense, a system does what it's designed to do, right? This system is something, like the design of the system is such that it can achieve what has happened. But also, you can look at it as the design of this system is inherently flawed for what they've stated it as. And so they, as a result, we can conclude that they're really quite happy with the outcome that they're getting, which is just killing ordinary civilians.
Right. Something that was just sort of sprinkled in the 972 article, which I noticed and I noticed you wrote about, is that they're using, the Israeli military is using WhatsApp groups and information from WhatsApp to generate these kill lists using Lavender. I'm just wondering how the army or the military would be able to obtain this information if Meta claims that WhatsApp is, and quote, end-to-end encrypted software.
So that is the big question, and that is something for Meta to investigate and report. There's a number of options. So one, perhaps the IDF is lying completely, right? They are not, in fact, using any information, and they're just blowing up civilians. That is, a real possibility. Another is that they're getting the information directly from WhatsApp, from Meta, through their normal requests for data, which is something that happens. If that is the case, then Meta should not be doing that. It should cut the IDF off, and it should never have been doing that in the first place. And so it needs to tear down its entire organization that allowed that to happen. Another option is that they are getting the data through a backdoor. And a backdoor could be a human backdoor. So there's an awful lot of IDF members who work at Meta. There's an awful lot of former 8200. So 8200 is the name of the signal intelligence unit in the IDF. It's one of the largest units, and it's what does intelligence. Sort of the Israeli NSA is one way to think about it. And an awful lot of those members, including their chief information security officer, who is one of the most senior people and the most senior policy person in the company, is former 8200. So there is an option that there are people in Meta, even though it might not be an official Meta policy, who are sharing this information. Another option is that this information is being found through the other kind of backdoor, through a software backdoor. Perhaps the IDF knows something about WhatsApp that Meta doesn't. And in fact, there is I've been told about something which would allow the telecoms provider or someone who has access to the actual packets to be able to determine information about group membership. And that is something which is sort of going around in the industry, that maybe this thing exists. And so there's questions there. Does Meta know this exists? If Meta does know this exists, and they continue to market WhatsApp as end-to-end secure, that's somewhere between irresponsible and complicit. Especially in somewhere like Palestine, or really any oppressive regime where the government or where the regime is able to inspect all of the internet traffic of its citizens. In Palestine, it's subjects, I suppose. So those are things that are, that Meta should be looking into. We don't know which one of these it is. Meta should do a full end-to-end investigation on this and tell us publicly which of these it is. And it may be that Meta should be telling us you should not be using WhatsApp if you're in an oppressive regime. And this end-to-end privacy claim that it has is not true. And if that is the case, then that is something that it is irresponsible of them to keep to themselves, if that is indeed the situation.
Would Meta ever actually fully make an investigation and publish the results completely truthfully, or would that just be quite hurtful to their business model, and they've kind of been infamous for not taking these things very seriously.
The thing to understand about large companies like this is that they have, there are many mechanisms of responsibility for this. So what you'll get, for example, is if they should do a investigation and don't, people internally will ask questions. You can also get things like Congress asking questions or the EU asking questions about this. If reporters start to ask questions and they don't answer, then it becomes clear that they have something to hide. If they do some sort of little investigation, but they lie about it, that information will leak out. If they do a full investigation, then refuse to publish it, then that information might leak out. Or it might cause people to start putting pressure internally, might cause people to start quitting or to start leaking information. So there are many mechanisms. You can't really look at a company like Meta as this sort of, single evil organization. It is just, a corporation. It is looking out for itself, but it is also made up of a lot of people. And a lot of those people have different interests than necessarily the organization itself. And in order to keep those people happy, whether they're internal or external, the organization does sometimes have to do this sort of investigation, even if it implicates itself. It becomes the better thing for the organization's survival. Like Meta does better by doing a thorough investigation and says we made some mistakes than it does trying to cover it up.
Right. Okay. So I guess I have another question about similarly large corporations like Google. We recently saw them laying off 28 employees for simply peacefully protesting. So I just worry that in the case of Meta, it might just fall into this terrifying loop where if someone does speak up, they endanger everything and they might lose their job and their life. And the only way for us to know anything is if someone on the inside speaks up and helps cooperate. So I'm just worried if this situation would just be brushed up to the side in the same way that Google has essentially just silenced its employees.
So it's interesting. Google hasn't silenced the employees; it has fired employees. What that has done is the exact opposite of silencing them. It has moved their cause to the top of newspapers and the press. It has given them the ability to share what it was like inside Google, where the suppression of Google of their own activities, as well as where the suppression via social media and algorithms on YouTube and in Google search, how that sort of thing happens. So really, it has had the opposite effect. Within Meta has a Palestinian working group, and those are people who are working within Meta to make changes to Meta, and it is a group that is needed. I mean, any sort of these internal reform groups, if they work within the system, they are aided an awful lot by people who work outside the system like us. People who make that noise publicly gives the ability of people internally to have more leverage, to have more evidence that the work that they do is valuable. And overall, the thing that Meta wants to do is protect Meta. So if this is a real thing, then they are going to want to do those changes. And you are 100% right that people are afraid for their jobs. In some cases, they're afraid for their lives. So it is incumbent on us to report on this sort of thing so that they have more leverage to do things internally and don't have to quit. But that if they do have to quit, it will be over something big, because society has done their part in asking the questions of big corporations like Meta about their responsibility and irresponsibility and complicity with Israel's actions.
Right. Okay. So to circle back to the lavender and AI in wars. So when someone like me who isn't really immersed in the tech industry looks at something like this, frankly, I'm terrified. I mean, AI-generated kill lists that are based on very flimsy parameters. Sometimes they're not even fully automated. Like in the 972 article, one of the sources wrote that he just added something like 200 new targets to the tracking system because the number of attacks we were conducting decreased. And that's a quote. So that just sets terrifying precedent. So in the eyes of an expert like you, could this be the future of war?
It certainly is if we don't stop it. There's two ways to look at this, and one of them is that we shouldn't actually be worried so much about the future of war as we should be about the future of civil society. The tools that Israel uses in Gaza and in Palestine are tools that find their way onto the streets here. They're tools that find their way into police, into the justice system, into the prison industrial complex. They're all tools that are sold to repressive regimes and to supposedly democratic regimes because they are useful for keeping track of dissidents, keeping track of people who are political opponents, all that sort of thing. So these ideas need to be opposed on that front. On the other side of it, the way to look at this in this war is not that this is an AI tool, but rather that this is a tool that is used to ethics wash a irresponsible genocidal action that's happening here, right? Because if the AI suggests someone and then Israel just immediately rubber stamps it, what they are saying is actually we're just killing civilians, right? What the Lavender article is saying is there is an AI system that gives Israel plausible deniability to kill civilians. And it doesn't actually give them plausible deniability. They are still killing civilians. Everything they've been doing is killing civilians. And what this article is saying is, here is how we kill civilians, and here is how we killed so many civilians. So the AI side of this, it's something where there needs to be reform and regulation in the AI industry so that it is recognized that what Israel is saying here is not actually, look at the fine application of AI that we use. It is actually so that people can say, well, this is massively inappropriate. You're literally just killing people with no evidence, because that's what's happening.
Right, and you said something about it gives them plausible deniability and they can just blame the system, which is something that they clearly stated that they, in the early days of the war, were just completely not checking anything that the system was suggesting. They would just carry it out with no remorse, and that's the terrifying aspect of it.
So something to once you start working on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you start to realize that everything that Israel says is either a lie or is spin or is some sort of plausible deniability. So if we look at the starvation that was going on, first aid trucks couldn't get in for who knows what reason, and then there's protests at the border by Israeli citizens. Then there's reasons to shut down the trucks because it's the wrong kind of insulin, or we don't allow these particular medical supplies, or we don't allow this particular food in, right? All of these are manufactured reasons to allow them to do the things that they want to do and to put a veneer of responsibility on top of it. Everything in October 7th was the same thing, right? They manufactured lies about beheaded babies, for example. And that was used so that they could, wage an aggressive war that they were planning on doing anyway. Everything like that is the same part of trying to provide plausible deniability for the thing that they do. Right? They're trying to say to people in the West, to people who are reporting on this, oh no, we're actually doing something normal here. It's like the aid can't go through because whatever reason. And in this case, well, the bombing happened because the system, we've built this AI system, this magical system that tells us who Hamas is. And it is the responsibility of people looking at that to say, well, you're lying about October 7th. You're lying about the aid situation. You're lying about killing people in the World Central Kitchen. You're lying about the port. You're lying about the aid trucks. And you're lying about the AI. The genocide is something that is happening because the Israeli army deliberately dropped bombs and they needed an excuse. Why can we drop bombs on civilians? I know. Let's have an AI system that tells us it's okay to do so.
Right. And what can we as individuals, sure, but also as a society, governments and officials and coalitions and human rights organizations, how can we bring light to this, and how can we help halt it, or at least systemize it in a way that it is, right now it just feels reckless. How can we stop that?
So we need to take a retrospective on this genocide in the same way as we take a retrospective on the Holocaust or the genocide in Bosnia. These are things that were caused by systems and people and laws and politics, and we need to say, as they say about the Holocaust, never again, right? Never again for anyone. Why is it that, what were the specific systematic elements of this? Well, AI as a weapon is one of them. Another one is the infiltration of Zionists across the United States and the UK and the West. Another one is the suppression of Palestinian content and information about freeing Palestine, and the algorithmic rabbit holes that come out of social media companies. The other one is the unrestricted power of big tech. Another one is AIPAC and the ADL and their infiltration of the US government and the systems of government in the case of the ADL. So all of these are elements of how this genocide was allowed to happen, and each one of them needs to be looked into and ripped apart separately.
All right. Yeah, that was it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.